Hi again. In the chapter, A Nation Reborn, in this freedom Whence by John Wesley Bready, the character of England at the end of the 18th and the beginning of the 19th century. This subhead is New Birth, New Character, New Moral and Social Zeal. Mr. G.W.E. Russell, a liberal undersecretary and detached observer reviewing the characteristics of evangelical religion as he encountered it in the latter part of the 19th century, writes, "I recall an abiding sense of religious responsibility, a self-sacrificing energy in works of mercy, an evangelistic zeal, an aloofness from the world, and a level of saintliness in daily life such as I do not expect again to see realized on earth. Everything, down to the minutest details of action and speech, were considered with reference to eternity. Money was regarded as a sacred trust. People of good positions and comfortable incomes habitually kept their expenditure within narrow limits that they might contribute more largely to objects they held sacred. The evangelicals were the most religious people whom I have ever known." End of Russell quote. This type of character and service grew naturally out of evangelical faith, which sought to bring all mankind, independent of race, sex, or station, into abiding personal communion with God. The revival proclaimed the infinite latent value of even the downmost soul. Different from the Puritan movement preceding and the Oxford movement succeeding, the evangelical movement centered religion neither in the state nor in the church, but in the individual and the home. True religion, it taught, is the life of God in the soul of man, bearing fruit in every good work. Yet, as suggested in Cowper's noble poem, The Task, from the individual and the home, this movement spread the vision, fellowship, and power of vital religion to the ends of the earth. Its purpose was to cause the Spirit of Christ to permeate all departments of life. Not only the individual, the home, and the church, therefore, would it claim for the kingdom, but the world of business, economics, and education, all social relationships, all national and international affairs. These, too, would it bring under the lordship of him who went about doing good. The Bible, to the evangelical movement, was the book of books, and if the revival's belief in the all-sufficiency of the Scriptures tended sometimes towards bibliolatry and sabbatarianism, it tended always toward high purpose, self-restraint, and serenity of character. If evangelical theology often was narrow, it at least had the depth of its narrowness, a depth contrasting acutely with the shallowness of much boasted modern breadth. Wherever the revival spread, its first aim was to dispel religious illiteracy, and in so doing it became a mighty educational force. To the individual convert, his much underlined personal Bible was his handbook of moral and spiritual guidance. To the evangelical household, the family Bible was not only the sacred register of births, baptisms, marriages, and deaths, it also was the medium of family worship, wherein parents and children were daily lifted together to the throne of grace. To all evangelical society, the Bible was both chart and compass in the voyage of life. Nor is it any accident that out of this movement sprang the British and Foreign Bible Society, which along with its American offspring has to date circulated the Scriptures in manifold tongues and in hundreds of millions of copies throughout the world. The movement placed little emphasis on aesthetics and less on aesthetic symbolism. It shunned as superficial all art for art's sake theories of thought, expression, or conduct. Its worship was simple to the point of austerity, but reverence was at its heart, and where reverence dwells, decency and order are never absent. In most branches of the revival, the sacraments were esteemed as special and divinely appointed means of grace, to be administered only by duly ordained shepherds of Christ. But in all branches, priestly domination over the consciences of fellow Christians was discountenanced. To this second Reformation, more deeply spiritual than the first, the priesthood of all believers was of arch significance, for it was not every convert For was not every convert a missionary of Christ? Thus the spiritual character of all true greatness was strongly emphasized, with results that often cut clean athwart 100 hampering social prejudices. To this movement there was neither Greek nor barbarian, male nor female, bond nor free. All were one in Christ. Women were treated as equals of men. The cause of the slave was championed because black chattels were immortal souls and free men in Christ, while missionaries were dispatched over the 7 seas to proclaim, even to cannibals, the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, and the evangel of goodwill. On all sides, the movement breathed a more soulful conception of the purpose and goal of life, thus engendering new standards of attainment and success. And one of its marked manifestations was its capacity for creating lay saints to whom prayer and meditation became instinctive, and to whom Christian altruism was the certain fruit of Christian faith. For all the importance which the revival attached to the reborn individual, always it emphasized that he was reborn to a social end, and 2 of Wesley's maxims were indelibly impressed upon all true evangelical tradition. 1, the gospel of Christ knows no religion but social, no holiness but social holiness. And 2, I look upon all the world as my parish. Never should it be forgotten that if the revival implied marked inhibition, it insisted that pure religion is positive. Inhibitions, therefore, represented but the pruning of the branches that the tree might bring forth more and better fruit. Nor, despite its intensity, was this new Puritanism as narrow as it is often portrayed. Vehemently did it believe in freedom of conscience, and if some of its representatives opposed Catholic emancipation, it was because they thought the consciences of masses of Roman Catholics were priest-ridden and therefore not free. It is significant, however, that whereas most old high church leaders continued to the end to oppose Catholic emancipation, most evangelicals came to support it. From 1813 to the end of his parliamentary career, Wilberforce spoke in favor of Catholic emancipation in the House of Commons. Persecution for religious opinions, he pronounced, not only one of the wickedest, but one of the most foolish things in the world. While to give the Catholics the vote and go no further, that is, keep them out of Parliament, he insisted was to let them out of prison and keep them in their convict's dress. When this question reached an issue in 1829, all 3 evangelical bishops, Ryder and the Sumner brothers, supported emancipation in the House of Lords. In the Commons, such stalwart evangelicals as Lord Ashley, Shaftesbury, then in his 28th year, Buxton, Thornton, and the Grants all voted for Catholic liberty, while the now aged Simeon bestowed upon Catholic emancipation his approbation, and Reverend Daniel Wilson wrote a pamphlet favoring it. In the case of the famous Reform Bill of 1832, evangelicals as a body were largely behind this political advance, not so much because the bill was democratic, for still they retained haunting memories of democracy's rule of terror in France, as because it was anti-oligarchic and because it would clear the ground for the reform of rotten boroughs within the church. Next time, Wilberforce and the Clapham sect. Put a link into Shaftesbury. Victor Shepherd wrote a tribute to this great man of God whose sacrifices dominated the social industrial progress of England in the 19th century. And yet he's almost unknown today. Certainly was unknown to us when we were witnesses. So next time, Wilberforce and the Clapham sect.